Look at what he says in verse 11. It says, and they overcame him by what? The blood of the Lamb. So here's what I think that he's saying here. He says, first of all, we got to be saved. For this thing to work, obviously you've got to be a Christian, right? But the other side of the coin we know is there's a lot of people living this Christian life that's lost. The devil has done such a good job deceiving them. He's got them in the church, teaching Sunday school, preaching in the pulpits, singing in the choir, and they're just as lost as the most vile guy you've ever met in your life. That's how good he is. So if we got to understand, in verse 11 it says, and they overcame. Who is they?
Brethren.
Us. The Christians. We know in verse 10 he's accusing us before God day and night. And he turns verse 11 and says, and they overcame him. They being us. We overcame. We overcome on a daily basis. First of all, by the blood of the Lamb. First of all, I'm saved. I'm saved this morning. Second of all, salvation was promised. Look in Isaiah 45. Look at this promise that we have. In Isaiah chapter 45, verse 17 and 18. And somebody tell me when this was written. Anybody know when Isaiah, the book of Isaiah pretty much was written? How much information did he have about Jesus? How much had he read about Jesus? How much had he experienced who Jesus was? None. This is 700 years, somewhere in thereabouts, before Jesus is ever born. So this is a prophecy, basically, that Isaiah said. In verse 17 says, but Israel shall be saved by the Lord with an everlasting salvation. Ye shall not be ashamed, nor confounded world without end. Verse 18 says, for thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it, not in vain. It says, he formed it to be inhabited, and I am the Lord, and there is none else. End of story. That is Isaiah making that statement 700 years before Jesus was born. Now we're over here in Revelation. Jesus come, he was the sacrifice, he lived 33 years, a perfect life, created salvation, an opportunity, shed his blood, was in the grave 3 days, rose again, and now he's at the right hand of the Father. And this is what John is saying. He says, first of all, we have to overcome by the blood of the Lamb. Are you saved? So, knowing that our salvation was promised, we must have an understanding of the blood. What is the blood? Why is blood important? So why is blood important?
Because it's what God accepts as coming for our sin.
Even in the Old Testament, 700 years, 1,000 years, back in the Old Testament, the sacrifice that Brother Danny spoke of this morning was a blood sacrifice once a year in the Holy of Holies. The priest went in once a year to atone for the sins of the people. It was always about blood. Blood is very important because blood represents life. That's what it is. So the shedding of blood, and he tells us in his word that without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. So the Old Testament was true to the blood. Jesus came, fulfilled the law, spilled his blood, shed his blood, ultimately for us. One drop of Jesus' blood was sufficient to save the entire world from time and eternity. But there had to be blood. Keep that in mind. Make sure you understand that the blood is very, very important. Anybody trying to get to heaven any other way, works, all that, no. The blood had to be shed, and you have to be saved through that blood sacrifice that Jesus laid for you and for me. So first of all, we've got to be overcome by the blood. We've got to be saved. The second thing I want you to understand is the word of their testimony. Look back in verse 11. It says, and they, us again, overcame him by what? Blood of the Lamb, we understand, and by the word of their testimony. What does that mean? Witnessing others. Our testimony is huge. It's all we have. It's all I've got. And I wrote down, it says, the life that we live will tell the whole story. Reactions will show the true man. And Adrian Rogers said this years ago. I heard him say it. I've never forgotten it. I've said it many, many times. Don't judge a man by his actions. Judge him by his reactions. Let something happen unexpectedly and see how the guy reacts, or the gal, whoever. That will tell you what's truly in his heart and who the true man is. So we got to understand that our testimony is very important. If we're going to overcome, we got to overcome by salvation. Second of all, it's our testimony. We got to live for him. We're called to do that. It's a requirement. Our testimony is huge. Back to witnessing. What's one thing that you can't argue with me about? What's one thing that we cannot argue about?
salvation.
Personal experiences.
What happened to me? If Casey says that she went to Wilkesboro yesterday and she saw a blue billy goat walk a tightrope across Main Street, or what, and she said she saw it, I can't say, no, you didn't, because I wasn't there. Right? So, your testimony is all you have. Nobody can argue with what God has done for you. Just like Ralph is testifying this morning, and Jason, I'm just so thankful this morning. But nobody can argue with my testimony. Now, we can take this Bible and we can argue about it all day long. We can find things to argue about that are non-essentials that we can spend all day long and accomplish absolutely nothing. And that person you're arguing with leave there lost as a goat, just like they were when you started the conversation. I'll never forget Jerry Fugate said years ago, if you debate him, they'll hate him. This can't be a debate. It's information. And it's acceptance. Share the information, and it's up to them to accept it or reject it. They're not going to change what I believe, because I know what I believe. I've grounded myself enough to know where I stand and why I stand. Therefore. So understand that our testimony is huge. And we got to do that and understanding that when you're out here in this world, your reactions are more important than your actions. So be careful. Be careful when you're on the job. So he says there, first of all, got to be saved in our testimony. And the last thing, this is the thing that Rex pointed out to me yesterday when we were talking. He says, and they love not their lives unto the death. What does that mean? Who can't you hold hostage? If I had information on Charles that I could just destroy his life, I saw him, I caught him. I caught him red-handed. And all I got to do is call Jill and I could just ruin his life for him. Call his mom and daddy, I could just really ruin his life. What would keep me from being able to hold him hostage in that situation? What could he do that could just nullify anything that I would do?
Dispute it.
Huh?
Dispute what you said.
They don't care.
I don't care. Here, call her. Call Mama. Call you. I don't care. I'm to the point in my life, I don't care. It's all about me. So the man that you can't hold hostage is the man who doesn't care. So what happens to us is the devil can't hold us hostage if what? Think about us now. Let's put us in our spiritual realm. The devil can't hold me hostage if what?
You know, Christ has your life, not yourself.
I know that.
Life is not my own.
My life is not my own. I'm bought with a price. What else?
If you ain't doing nothing for the cause of Christ, I mean, he's not got anything.
He's already won in that case, hasn't he? I'm not doing anything across. But look at what he says here. What does he say in that last part? And that they love their lives unto what?
Death.
The death. Are you willing to die for him? It's one thing to say, I'll live for him. I'll be a good Christian. I'll show up at Pleasant Hill every time the doors are open. But if somebody gives a choice, say, hey, are you willing to die for him? Whoa, wait a minute. I don't know about dying. I mean, let's be honest with each other here. Are we willing to die for him? That's the question. What did Paul say about death when he got challenged?
Dies game.
To live is Christ. So what does that mean? When Paul said to live is Christ, what does he say?
As long as he's got Christ, he'll live forever.
My Christian life is awesome. I love serving God. I love preaching God's word. I love working at Riddlebug and sharing the gospel with everybody I knock on doors with. I love working at the pharmacy, reaching out, ministering to these people. I love my Christian life. So to live is Christ. If I'm alive, I'm going to live for him. But to die, he said, is what? Gain. What did he mean by that? That means that's the ultimate reward, right? I'm going to heaven to be with my Father. Take me out of this miserable world that we're living in. And don't have to worry about what election, who I'm going to vote for next month. Type stuff. So to live is Christ, to die is gain. Therefore, the devil can't hold Paul hostage, right? That's where you and I got to be. Are you to the point that you would literally die for it? To live is Christ, to die is gain. The problem with our Christian society is we're not to that point. And the devil holds us hostage. Jill, it's not the right time. What will they think? Not right now. God will give you another time. Jason, don't do it right now. He holds you hostage by situations. Does that make sense? That we don't stand for him. Therefore, we fail. Therefore, we sin because we didn't do the burden we talked about last week, that burden you got on your heart. You didn't respond to the burden. You didn't respond to the call because the devil held you hostage and talked you out of it. That just spoke to my heart yesterday. The more I thought about that, and there's three things that our life, everything that we do must do. Three things, and you may want to write these down. Anything that you do, any ministry that we have at this church, anything in your life that has a ministry opportunity needs to have three things involved in it. First of all, it needs to point the lost to Christ. At the end of the day, anything you're doing needs to make sure that the lost are pointed to Christ, to the cross. Second of all, it needs to lift up the fallen. A fellow Christian that's fallen away, backslidden. It needs to encourage him and draw him back to where he should be. And the third thing that it needs to do, it needs to encourage the saints. It needs to encourage those around you that are in the center of God's will, that are willing to die for the cause, that y'all are lifted up and encouraged within whatever ministry work that we're doing. And that's what Rex was talking about yesterday. He said, anytime I stand in the pulpit, those are three things that I feel I'm called to do during that time. He said, in my Christian walk, those are three things that I feel like I'm called to do. Speak to the lost, point them to the cross, encourage the backslidden, and encourage the saints, that we might be encouraged together to do more, to continue, to stay in that state of not being held hostage by the devil. So, my challenge for you this week is, think about that thing of being held hostage by the devil. Consider situations that you're in, that you say, and you hear that still small voice saying, oops, not right now. Let's do it another day. Think about that this week. And take a stand for God. To live as Christ, to die as gain. Looks like to me that's what we call a win-win in my world. How much better can it get? That's when the situation is great. When you got a win-win on your hands. Any other thoughts?